Thank you, President Groves. One more time, round of applause. This year, we welcome Zaid, an alumni of the School of Foreign Service class of 1997. Zaid is a Washington, D.C.-based attorney, diplomat, and technology policy leader whose career has spanned the White House, the State Department, and Silicon Valley. A proud Georgetown Hoya, Zaid arrived at Georgetown as a community scholar and has remained deeply connected to the Hilltop throughout his career. He serves on the Georgetown University Alumni Association Board of Governors, where he chaired the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and currently serves on the Nominations Committee. He has served as a longtime alumni admissions interviewer, a mentor in the Patrick Healy Fellowship Program, and on his class reunion committee. Today, he serves on the Dean's Advisory Board for the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown. His connection to Georgetown has followed him around the world. While serving as a U.S. diplomat in Cairo, he co-founded the Georgetown Club of Egypt, organizing the club's first reception at the U.S. ambassador's residence. His commitment to LGBTQ+ equality took root early. As a research assistant to Professor Suzanne Goldberg at Columbia Law School, Zaid researched state marriage equality and LGBTQ laws to help build the legal arguments challenging anti-marriage equality statutes across the country, work that contributed to the arc of litigation that culminated in the Supreme Court's landmark decision of Obergefell v. Hodges, establishing nationwide marriage equality. During the Obama administration, there's more. During the Obama administration, Zaid served as special assistant to President Obama and associate White House counsel, advising on national security, congressional oversight, and regulatory matters. Before the White House, he served as an appointee to the U.S. Agency for International Development, where he worked on the agency's LGBTQ+ inclusion and non-discrimination policy, among other sensitive policy matters. Earlier in his career, he was in private practice at WilmerHale and served as federal law clerk. Before law school, he was a U.S. diplomat posted in Iraq, Egypt, Tunisia, and at the United Nations. After serving at the White House, Zaid went on to lead crisis response policy at Meta and served as director and head of U.S. public policy at Cloudflare, where he led advocacy on AI governance, cybersecurity, and cloud security. He is currently a senior advisor at Orange Court Strategies. Zaid lives in Washington, D.C. with his husband and their 3 children. Please join me in welcoming Zaid to the stage.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Students, faculty, honored guests, welcome. And Lionel and Shiva, thank you for the invitation to speak today. I'm always glad to come back to Georgetown, but coming back to this is really special. Before I begin, I owe you all a little bit of an apology. I've got to run a little bit before 6. I have to go to a dinner, which is why I'm in a tuxedo. But for this event, I did wear my favorite socks. So I want to start with a confession. There was no Lavender Graduation when I was at Georgetown, and if there had been one in 1997, I would not have come. I wasn't ready. People used to say, nobody comes out at Georgetown, people come out after they graduate, and I was no exception. So let me begin by saying what I could not have heard, but what I hope you all will carry with you today. I see you, all of you, gay, lesbian, trans, bi, non-binary, everyone. Wherever you are in your journey, I see you, and Georgetown is a better place because of you. So I want to take you through a handful of moments and stories from the last couple of decades of my life, moments that, though they may seem somewhat disjointed as I tell them, I hope will add up to something. And that something is, we all have a part to play. In 1997, one of my best friends from Georgetown, Ben, asked me if I was gay. We were in Paris. He was studying abroad. I went to go visit him, and I told him no. Before coming out, Ben was the only person who ever asked me if I was gay, and I lied. I had my own way of rationalizing why I claimed not to be gay in my head, Because I had never been with another man, I could credibly claim not to be gay. You'll hear in a minute while that lie I told myself way too long ago made no sense, even as I was justifying it to myself at the time. The lie haunted me for years. When I came out, Ben was one of the first people I was eager to come out to. I told him that I was sorry that I had lied to him, and then he said I had nothing to be sorry for. He knew that my journey was mine to take and on my own time. He asked me if I was gay because he wanted me to know that he was my friend no matter what, that I could tell him anything. And then I told him something else. I told him that I was afraid that when I came out, that I might not have a family anymore. And without missing a beat, Ben said, "I will be your family." Today, Ben and his wife are the godparents of my 3 children, and I'm the godparent of his. This is what it means to show up for someone, and that's what it means to play your part. I grew up in a conservative Muslim family in Maryland. I came out to myself when I was 13. I stood in front of the mirror in the basement of my parents' house, and I said, "You are gay." And then the next thing I said was, "You have to marry a woman, you have to be a good husband, you have to be a good father." That was in 1988. I started coming out to my friends in 1999, but it wasn't until 2002, 14 years after I had looked myself in the mirror, and a lot of living, before I came out to my parents. And when I did, I didn't ask for tolerance. I demanded acceptance, unconditional love, and I refused to ask for it because I didn't think I needed to. It didn't go well. I didn't speak to my parents for nearly 2 years. But I want you to hear what James Baldwin said, quote, "You have to decide who you are and force the world to deal with you, not the idea of you," unquote. I believe this to its core. The world has to deal with us, not the idea of who they want us to be. That's not easy. It wasn't easy for me. It may not be easy for some of you, but it's yours to do on your own terms, in your own time. In May 2001, I was a young Foreign Service officer serving in Cairo, Egypt. It was my first posting. I was the special assistant to the US ambassador. I was out to some people, but I wasn't out yet at work, back when that was the thing. And that spring, the Egyptian authorities raided a boat on the Nile called the Queen Boat, known as a gathering place for gay men. Before they arrested anybody, the authorities asked the non-Egyptians to leave. 52 Egyptian men were then arrested. They were subjected to degrading interrogations and physical examinations. An emergency court convicted 23 of them for what the charges called, quote, "habitual debauchery," unquote, and they were given sentences of up to 5 years for hard labor. I was not on the boat, but I knew some of the men who were, and I knew who they were. And here's what I remember most. My ambassador, David Welch, Georgetown SFS class of 1975, a lifelong Republican, appointed by George W. Bush to that post, he made a point to go to the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of the Interior and personally to advocate on behalf of those men. There were no Americans among those who were detained, but he went anyway. He played his part. I've never forgiven that. At the time, I hadn't told the ambassador that I was gay, although I now know that he knew anyway. But here was a man who did not share the Egyptians' gay men's identity and had nothing personally at stake, who simply decided that human dignity demanded a response. And that's the lesson. You do not have to be the one who's targeted to be the one who speaks, to play your part. A year earlier, I was in Jordan doing visa interviews for a week. A man came to my window. He answered my routine questions about what he wanted to do when he visited the United States. Where was he going to do? Where was he going to stay? How was he going to pay for it? A few other routine questions. And then he slid a small piece of paper under the window. and the note said, "I'm gay." Based on the answers to the other questions I had asked him, I likely would have denied his application. But when I read those words, 2 words from a gay man living in Jordan in the year 2000, I understood what his life was, and I approved his visa. I thought about him many times over the years. I do not know what became of him, but I know that in that moment, I had a part to play. When I moved to New York in 2002, I was out at a gay bar in the West Village one night, and I ran into a friend of mine from Georgetown. Neither of us were out at Georgetown. We were so excited to see each other, and we started talking. Who else might be gay? Who else was in New York? This was before Hoyas with Pride, before the LGBTQ Resource Center, before there was any presence, official or unofficial, of LGBTQ alumni. We actually went through our old Facebook and started looking at people and saying, "Wait, what about that person?" And some of those folks we did contact. We were right in every instance. So we threw a party and then another. We had a brunch here, a gathering there. Word spread. People moved to New York and heard about us and found their way in. And the group kept growing. We didn't call it anything. We were just a group of gay Hoyas, both men and women, finding each other, showing up for each other, building something out of nothing. And that is community, and that's chosen family. In 2007, I was a law clerk on the First Circuit, and a case randomly landed on my desk. A man from Indonesia, a doctor, came to the United States on a visitor's visa and had then applied for asylum because he was gay. Months earlier, his patients in Indonesia found out that he was gay, and they refused to see him, to pay him. He couldn't work. He couldn't support himself. He had no way to earn a living. He had no support system. So he came here. He worked as a barista in Starbucks in Boston. After hearing his story and considering the evidence from human rights organizations, an immigration judge granted his asylum claim. But then the Board of Immigration Appeals reversed it without explaining why and what legal standard it applied, or why economic persecution of that kind didn't count. And up until that time, in 2007, there were very few cases granting asylum for gay asylum seekers, and many more cases explicitly rejecting their applications. And I saw that and I thought, not on my watch. The BIA appeals are normally routinely upheld. They normally don't even have hearings. People submit briefs, and usually the judges grant or reverse without much comment. But I went to my judge, and I told him that we had an opportunity to say that the BIA couldn't simply reverse without articulating any standard, that this man's inability to earn a living because he was gay deserved a real legal answer. My judge agreed, and he and his colleagues decided that the case should be sent back to the BIA for further proceedings, and that the BIA had to explain itself. As Frederick Douglass said, quote, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them," end quote. Sometimes the part you get to play isn't the final word, as in this case. Sometimes it's making sure that the right questions don't get buried. I want to tell you something I once said at a professional development conference in 2011. At that point, I'd been out for well over a decade. I wasn't meaning to say anything remarkable, but we had been asked to tell the group something that wasn't on our resume. So I said, "I'm Black, I'm gay, and I'm Muslim." Actually, I said, I was born Black, I was born gay, and I was born Muslim. And each of those things is an integral part of who I am. People came up to me afterwards and told me that I was brave. 3 people in the group told me that they were also gay, although others didn't know it. And I was surprised because, like I said, I'd been out for quite a while. I didn't think I'd really said anything radical or worthy of praise. But I'd forgotten, or maybe I'd never fully understood, that the truth, when it's your full truth, can be radical, can be disruptive, can be a gift to someone in the room who needed to hear it. That's intersectionality as well. It's not just a word, not just a framework. It's the insistence that all of who we are matters and that our liberation is bound together. In 2016, as a White House lawyer, I had the honor of taking a departure photo with President Obama in the Oval Office. I brought my mother and my husband, Giles, our sons, Rami and Zabi, our youngest, Badri, was not yet born. When I posted the photo on social media in November of 2016, I wrote what an honor it was to serve. I gave a shout out to my husband and my mother, and I happened to post it a few days after the 2016 election, and people were concerned about where we were going as a country. I didn't think much about what the photo represented, to be honest. I was just really excited that I got to take a photo with the president. But then people started responding to the photo online, and one of my friends, Vincent, a 21-year-old black gay man from a socially conservative Jamaican-American family, he wrote a comment on the photo, "This is everything." Vincent grew up in a post-Lawrence v. Texas world. He had come out much earlier than I had. In many ways, I assumed that he lived a much more optimistic life about his sexuality than I had at his age. He told me later that he'd never known a gay man who was a father, certainly not a black one. That seeing our family, a black gay man with his white Canadian husband, with their 2 adopted biracial children, their grandmother in her hijab in the Oval Office, with the first black president, made something real for him that had only been a possibility before. He said that the photo showed him what was possible. I didn't mean to do that. I was just living my life, but that's the thing about visibility. You don't always know who's watching. You don't always know whose world you're opening just by being you, by being present, by being seen. Etched on the wall of the Holocaust Museum in Washington are the words of Pastor Martin Nollmeyer. "First, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I'm not a communist." You know the rest, the trade unionists, the socialists, the Jews. And then they came for him, and there was no one left. I read those words and I think about our moment, about what's happening right now in this country to the most vulnerable among us. First, they came for women's rights to make fundamental decisions about their bodies, and we did not speak out because we were not women. Then they came for trans children's right to gender-affirming care, and we didn't speak out because we're not trans children. And then they came for trans adults, took away their driver's licenses, their dignity, their right to exist in public life, and we did not speak out because we're cisgender. Then they came for diversity, equity, and inclusion, dismantled the programs, fired the people, erased the histories, and we did not speak out because we were not black or brown or disabled. And then they came for you, and there was no one left to speak for you. An attack on any of us is an attack on all of us, and we each have a part to play in responding to the attacks and defending the dignity of our community, of our brothers and sisters. In 1925, Langston Hughes wrote, "I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes." I read that poem and I think about every queer person, every non-binary person, every trans person who has been told to eat in the kitchen, who has been asked to make themselves small, invisible, manageable, who has been told, not yet, not here, not you. But we are at the table, and we will not be moved. Which brings me to you, to this room, to today. We need you everywhere. We need the Bayard Rustins, the architect of the March on Washington, a gay black man erased from his own legacy for decades because of who he was. We need to know his name. We need to be his name. We need the Marsha P. Johnsons and the Sylvia Riveras, trans women of color who threw the first bricks at Stonewall so that you could throw graduation caps at graduation. We need the John Lawrences, the man who simply refused to leave his own bedroom, whose case became Lawrence v. Texas and changed the law in this country. We need the Jim Obergefells, who fought to have his husband's name on his death certificate and gave us marriage equality. And we need the Lionel Daggs III, our fierce leader of the LGBTQ Resource Center here at Georgetown. We need LGBTQ plus lawyers, judges, doctors. We need diplomats, presidents, first gentlemen, public school teachers, CEOs, social workers, nonprofit leaders, professors, consultants, advocates, parents. We need all of you in all the ways you show up. We need us to be everywhere, to be visible, to be unapologetically, fully, beautifully present. Because someone is always watching. Someone is always wondering in this life, their life, whether or not it's possible. And we each have a part to play. So lock arms with the most vulnerable among us. Block and tackle for those who cannot yet protect themselves. Remember that your freedom and theirs are not separate things. You don't have to give a speech. You don't have to carry a sign. Sometimes playing your part is holding your partner's hand in public. Sometimes it's correcting someone who assumes you have a wife or a husband or who uses the wrong pronouns. Sometimes it's surviving Georgetown, surviving your family, surviving this moment in history, and then showing up again tomorrow and doing it again. And if you are lucky, if you do the work, take the risk, build the community, live the full truth of who you are, as the late dancer and choreographer Bill T. Jones said, if you're lucky, you get to play all the parts. Congratulations, class of 2026. Go play your parts. Hoya Saxa.